The evening was nearly over when the CEO stepped out of the Grand Hotel, adjusting his expensive suit as warm lights glowed behind him. Inside, the city's wealthiest people were still celebrating, laughing, drinking, and talking about deals that could change lives. But outside, on the cold marble steps, someone else's life was breaking quietly. He noticed her only because she didn't move, even when people walked past her. A small, thin girl sat curled up near the entrance, hugging her knees tightly. Her clothes were torn, her hair messy, and her face looked pale from hunger. She wasn't begging or speaking, she just stared through the glass doors into the banquet hall. As if something inside was calling her, the CEO followed her gaze and saw the grand piano shining under the chandelier. Its black surface reflected crystal lights like a dream. The girl's eyes were fixed on it with a longing so deep that it surprised him. She looked as if she were staring at a memory one she desperately wanted to touch again. Most people walked around her, pretending she didn't exist. A security guard even tried to chase her away earlier, but she refused to leave. She wasn't causing trouble. She was just sitting there, lost in her own world. The CEO stood there for a moment, watching her. He wasn't a cruel man, but he wasn't known for kindness either. His life was filled with goals, meetings, and deadlines. He didn't have time for strangers. Still, something about the girl made him curious. Why was she staring at the piano, not the food or the people? He approached her with slow steps. She didn't notice him until his shadow fell over her. Startled, she looked up, and he was surprised to see her eyes big, tired, and filled with something he couldn't define. Fear? Hope? Pain? Maybe all three. You've been sitting here for hours, he said, his voice calm but firm. Why? The girl didn't answer immediately. She blinked a few times, as if trying to find her voice. I was listening, she whispered. Listening to what? He asked, raising an eyebrow. She pointed weakly through the glass doors. The piano? He glanced inside. The hotel pianist had played earlier, but the music had stopped long ago. You like music? He asked, not sure why he was still standing there. She nodded slowly. I used to play? Her voice trembled at the last word, as if it carried a weight she didn't want to remember. The CEO let out a small laugh, not a mean one, more like disbelief. This girl, sitting on the cold ground in ripped clothes, claiming she played the piano? It sounded impossible. But the way she said it, it wasn't pride. It was sadness. He crossed his arms. If you can really play, why are you out here? Her eyes dropped to the ground. She didn't answer. He sighed. He was tired, hungry, and honestly just wanted to go home. But a strange idea came to his mind, half as a joke and half because he wanted to test her words. Tell you what, he said, pointing toward the piano. If you can play even one decent piece, I'll feed you a proper meal, not leftovers. The girl froze. She looked at him in shock, as if he had offered her everything she ever wanted. Her stomach growled loudly, embarrassing her, and she pulled her arms closer around herself. He expected her to shake her head or get scared. He even expected her to run, but she stood up, slowly, unsteadily, as if her legs were too weak to carry her. She took a deep breath, wiped her face with her sleeve, and faced him with surprising determination. You'll really give me food? She asked in a soft voice. If you can play, he repeated with a small smile. He didn't believe she could. But at least it would get her off the steps. She nodded, without waiting for permission. The girl walked toward the entrance. People stared as she passed them. Some whispered in confusion, others frowned, judging her appearance. But she didn't look left or right. She didn't care about the fancy dresses or the expensive suits. Her eyes were locked on the piano. The CEO followed behind. Unsure if he'd made a mistake or if he was about to witness something unexpected. As she reached the piano, the chatter in the room began to fade. People watched out of curiosity. A homeless girl heading for a grand instrument. It looked ridiculous. She hesitated for just a second, touching the polished surface. A tear slid down her cheek and she quietly wiped it away. The piano wasn't just an object to her. It was a lost memory. A lost world. And now she was about to step back into it. The CEO folded his arms, waiting to see her fail, but inside, deep down, a small part of him wondered. What if she didn't? The girl's steps were slow as she walked toward the piano, as if every movement carried the weight of her past. Her thin sandals slapped softly against the marble floor, sounding painfully out of place inside the glamorous hall. The guests, dressed in glittering gowns and polished suits, turned their heads one by one. Their conversations faded into sharp whispers. Who is she? Why is she here? She looks homeless. But she didn't look at them. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, locked onto the grand piano like it was the only safe place in the entire world. The golden chandeliers above made the room sparkle, but none of that brightness reached her face. Her expression was full of fear and something deeper, something like determination fighting against despair. The CEO followed behind her, hands in his pockets, pretending he wasn't curious. But inside, his thoughts were racing. What is she doing? Why isn't she scared? He expected her to hesitate, maybe even turn around, but she kept walking with a strange calmness. When she finally reached the piano, she stopped. For a moment, she didn't touch it. She just stood there, breathing slowly, staring at her reflection in the polished black surface. A tired, dirty girl looked back at her someone she'd barely recognized anymore. Her fingers twitched at her sides. It had been so long since she last saw a real piano up close. Too long. She used to touch piano keys every day, practicing until her fingers hurt, pushing herself to be better. Music was the only thing that made her feel alive. But life had taken everything away from her home, her family, her hope. Now, suddenly, she was standing in front of a grand piano again. She lifted her hand, but stopped halfway. Her fingers were shaking. What if she had forgotten? What if the music inside her had died? Behind her, the guests whispered louder. The CEO cleared his throat impatiently, tapping his foot. Go on, he said. It was supposed to be a challenge, maybe even a joke. But his voice sounded softer than he expected. The girl inhaled deeply and finally placed her fingertips on the cool surface of the piano. She felt a small shock inside her, like touching an old friend after many years. Her chest tightened as memories flooded her, her mother's gentle voice, her teacher's praise, the small competitions she used to win, the applause. And then the silence that came after she lost everything. She closed her eyes. The crowd was no longer there. The lights disappeared. The noise faded. In her mind, there was only her and the piano. Slowly, she pulled the bench out and sat down. The bench creaked under her weight, drawing more attention. Some guests exchanged annoyed looks. Others were curious, waiting to see if this strange moment would become entertainment or disaster. The girl didn't care. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the smooth ivory under her fingers. Her hands were dirty and bruised, but when they rested on the piano, they looked different, almost graceful, like they were made for music. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. The CEO began to wonder if she had lied. But then, her fingers moved, not to play a note, just a small movement, like her hands were remembering something on their own. She pressed one key gently. A soft, pure sound filled the room. She opened her eyes slightly. The sound was beautiful. It was enough to give her courage. She pressed another key, then two more. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. Slowly, she began to form simple chords. The room grew strangely quiet. Even the servers paused with trays in their hands. The CEO stood behind her, his eyes widening a little. Is she actually playing? The girl took another breath and let her fingers glide across the keys. This time, the notes weren't random. They were familiar. A melody she hadn't played in years. A piece her mother had taught her when she was little. The notes were warm, fragile, and cracked with emotion. The guests stopped whispering. The music was soft at first, like a bird trying to sing after its wings healed. But as she played, her back straightened, her fingers steadied, and the melody grew stronger. Her expression changed too. She looked less afraid, as if the music was lifting her from the shadows she had been trapped in. Her hands moved faster now, dancing across the keys. The melody filled the room, wrapping around everyone listening. The chandeliers shined brighter as if responding to her rhythm. Even the CEO felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. People began walking closer. A woman in a sparkling blue dress covered her mouth in shock. A man near the table set down his drink slowly, eyes widening. A few guests whispered again, but this time with surprise, not judgment. Is she a professional? How can she play like that? She looks so young. The CEO rubbed his chin, confused and impressed. He had expected a single clumsy note. Maybe two. But this was talent. Real talent. Hidden under dirt, hunger, and pain, the girl kept her eyes half closed as she played, tears slipping down her cheeks. Not from sadness? Not anymore. From relief. For the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again, and everyone felt it. The entire hall fell under the spell of her fragile, powerful music. The CEO took a step forward, watching her carefully. This girl was not what he thought she was. Something extraordinary was unfolding right in front of him. The last note of her warm-up faded softly into the silence of the hall, but the girl did not stop. That small taste of music sparked something inside her, a spark she thought had died long ago. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, trembling, uncertain. Then she pressed down again, this time. She didn't play simple chords or gentle notes. She began a real piece, a piece she had learned years ago, back when her life still had light in it. A piece that held her happiest memories and her deepest sorrow. The first few notes were slow and thoughtful, like waking from a long, cold sleep. The sound floated through the air, soft, fragile, but full of meaning. The guests leaned forward without even realizing it. The CEO, standing behind her, felt his breath catch in his throat. This can't be real, he thought. How can she play like this? Her fingers glided across the piano, moving faster and smoother with every passing second. They were thin and bruised, but they danced with a natural grace, as if the piano itself recognized them. The music grew richer, deeper, and more emotional. It felt like every note carried a piece of her soul. As she played, her face changed. The fear faded. The sadness lessened. Her expression softened into concentration, then into something brighter, something like peace. It was as if the piano was healing her with every sound. The room changed too. What had been a noisy, elegant banquet became a silent audience, mesmerized by a girl who looked like she had nothing yet. Somehow held everything. People forgot about their expensive meals and fancy conversations. They forgot about business deals and social status. All eyes were on the girl at the piano, who played as if she had been kicked out of the world but found her way back through music. The melody rose higher, becoming more powerful. The notes touched something deep inside the listeners, memories, emotions, hidden wounds. A woman in a silver gown felt tears fill her eyes. A man at the nearest table put a hand over his chest. As if the music had reached somewhere he didn't expect, the server holding a tray of champagne shifted slowly, careful not to make a single sound. That could break the spell, but the one most affected was the CEO. He had offered food as a joke, a challenge, a way to push her away. He never expected her to walk inside. He never expected her to sit down. And he certainly never expected this. He watched her fingers fly over the keys, each note more confident than the last. This wasn't just good playing. This was talent on a level he had only seen in professional concerts, the kind he sometimes attended to impress clients. But even those performances didn't feel like this. This girl's music wasn't perfect. Because it was trained. It was perfect because it was honest. Raw. Real. Her shoulders shook as she played. But she didn't stop. Not even when a tear slid down her cheek. She kept going, pouring everything she had, every heartbreak, every memory, every hope into the piano. No one in the hall moved. It felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Then something unexpected happened. A soft sob escaped her. She didn't try to hide it. She didn't try to wipe her tears. Her emotions slipped into the melody, making the music even more beautiful in a painful way. She played like someone who had nothing left to lose but everything left to say. The CEO stepped closer without thinking. He saw her up close now, her messy hair, her dirty sleeves, the tears on her face. But those things didn't matter. He saw something else. Call on strength. Courage. A fire that refused to die. She wasn't just playing the piano, she was fighting her way. Back to life, and everyone could feel it. The music suddenly swelled, loud and full, filling the entire ballroom with powerful notes. The chandeliers shook with the vibrations. The tables trembled slightly. The guests' hearts thudded in their chests. Then, just as suddenly, the music softened again. The melody turned gentle and heartbreakingly sweet, like a lullaby sung for a child who would never come home. Her fingers slowed, brushing the keys with tenderness. She whispered something under her breath, too soft for anyone to hear, but her lips formed a single word. Mom. The CEO's eyes widened slightly. He understood a little now. The music wasn't just a performance. It was a story. Her story. She reached the final notes. They were slow, soft, and lingering, like a goodbye she wasn't ready to say. When her fingers finally lifted from the keys, the sound hung in the air for a long, delicate moment. Silence followed, a deep silence, full, heavy, and breathtaking. No one clapped. Not because they didn't want to, but because they were too stunned to move. Too touched to speak. The girl lowered her hands onto her lap. Her shoulders rose and fell as she breathed heavily. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't wait for praise. She just sat there, exhausted, empty, and silently crying. The CEO stepped closer, almost afraid to break the fragile magic still hanging in the room. He had expected a hungry girl asking for food. What he found instead was a miracle hiding in plain sight. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped moving. The last note she played still floated in the air, as if refusing to disappear. The girl sat frozen, her back slightly bent, her hands trembling over her lap. She kept her eyes down, afraid to look at the crowd. Afraid to see judgment? Or worse, pity. But no one judged, no one pitied. They were simply stunned. The silence was so deep that the soft hum of the chandelier lights suddenly sounded loud. Even the air felt different, heavier, filled with something indescribable. Finally, a sound broke the stillness. A single gasp from someone standing at the back of the hall, and then, slowly, the room came back to life. People blinked as if waking from a dream. A woman wiped her tears with the corner of her designer shawl. A man near the bar let out a long breath he didn't realize he was holding. Someone whispered, "That was unbelievable," while another murmured, "Who is she?" But even with all the whispers, no one moved too quickly. They didn't want to disturb her. There was something sacred about the way she sat, quiet, fragile, like a delicate glass figure that might break with one wrong touch. The CEO stepped forward. His footsteps echoed across the marble floor. This time, he didn't walk with arrogance or judgment. He walked slowly, with a strange softness. Unsure of what he was feeling, he stopped beside her and looked down. The girl's hair fell over her face, hiding her expression. She didn't know whether she should stand, apologize, or run. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like she had opened a wound in front of strangers. "Hey," the CEO said gently. She flinched at his voice, expecting anger or mockery, but his tone was calm, almost warm. "That was—" He paused, searching for the right word, something he wasn't used to doing. "Incredible." The girl slowly looked up, confusion clouding her tired eyes. She wasn't used to praise. Not anymore. She wasn't used to people looking at her with anything except irritation or fear. "Incredible?" she whispered, unsure. He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Yes, that was real talent." Before she could respond, a sudden wave of applause burst through the room, soft at first. Then louder. And louder. The entire hall stood up, men in polished shoes, women in glittering gowns, servers, musicians, everyone. They clapped for her the way they clapped for the best performers. For people who had earned respect and admiration. The girl's eyes widened in shock. She looked around as if she couldn't believe the sound was for her. She had never been applauded for anything in years. She had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, to be valued. Her lip trembled, her hands shook. Her heart raced with disbelief. The CEO placed a hand lightly on the piano, leaning closer so only she could hear. "They're clapping for you," he said softly. "You moved them." Her throat tightened. Tears filled her eyes again. But this time they weren't from sadness. They were from feeling alive. One of the hotel musicians stepped forward. He was a middle-aged man with gentle eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. He bowed slightly to her, a gesture of respect she never expected. "Miss," he said kindly, "that was one of the finest performances I've ever witnessed. Where did you learn to play like that?" She swallowed hard. I used to take lessons when I was younger, before things changed." The musician nodded understandingly. "You have a gift most people dream of. Don't lose it." Her breath hitched. The applause continued, echoing against the walls like a warm embrace. For once, the girl didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like a burden or a shadow in society. She felt like someone who mattered. The CEO watched her quietly. He wasn't a man who was easily impressed. In fact, he rarely felt emotional about anything. His life was full of logic, goals, and money. But seeing this girl, small, dirty, exhausted, transform into someone powerful the moment she touched the piano, it stirred something inside him that he didn't recognize. The applause finally began to fade, but the admiration in the guests' eyes did not. People whispered about offering her help, about her talent, about how unbelievable the moment had been. The CEO leaned a little closer to her. "You played better than most professionals," he said. "You won the room without trying." She looked at him with a soft, stunned expression. I only wanted to play again. Just once." He raised an eyebrow. "Just once? After that performance? You should be performing on stages, not sitting outside hungry." Her face reddened slightly. She lowered her head, unsure how to respond. He studied her for a moment, her thin shoulders, her trembling fingers, the quiet way she breathed like she was afraid the moment would disappear. Then he said something he hadn't planned to say, something he himself didn't fully understand. "You played for food," he said, "but what you gave us was far more valuable." Her eyes widened again. "And I'm not done helping you," he added, for the first time in a very long time. Hope flickered inside her, soft, small, but real. The applause faded into a soft murmur as people slowly returned to their seats, but their eyes never left the girl. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, embarrassed, yet something inside her felt warm for the first time in years. She sat straight, still overwhelmed, still trembling, still trying to understand what had just happened. The CEO stood beside her, watching her quietly. His expression was no longer stern or amused, it was thoughtful, even gentle. A side of him nobody expected to see, not even he himself. "You must be starving," he said finally. "Come with me." Her eyes widened, unsure if she heard him correctly. The challenge had been a joke, something he thought she would never pass. But now, after hearing her play, he spoke with a serious tone that made her heart beat faster. "Really?" she whispered. He nodded once. "Really?" She stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she followed him through the hall. The guests moved aside respectfully, creating a path for her. No longer did they look at her with disgust or confusion. Instead, they looked at her with admiration, curiosity, even awe. Some people whispered softly, "She's so talented. She must have had training. She shouldn't be on the streets." Each comment touched her deeply. But she kept her gaze low, afraid that if she looked around too much, this moment would disappear like a dream. The CEO guided her to a small, elegant table near the corner. A server rushed over, nervous and unsure. "Anything she wants," the CEO instructed. "Bring it quickly." The server nodded and hurried away. The girl sat down carefully, afraid she might dirty the expensive chair. She folded her hands tightly on her lap, unsure how to act. It had been so long since she sat at a table like this. So long since someone offered her food with kindness. "You didn't lie about playing," the CEO said, breaking the silence. She looked up at him. "I wouldn't lie about music," she replied quietly. He studied her for a moment. "How did you learn?" "You played like someone who trained for years." Her throat tightened. She looked down at her fingers, gently rubbing the tips, remembering the feeling of piano keys from a different life. "My mother taught me," she said softly. "She loved music. She said I was born with a special ear." She gave a tiny, broken smile. "I used to practice every day. We didn't have much, but she always made sure I had a piano teacher. The CEO leaned closer slightly, listening carefully. What happened to her? He asked gently. The girl took a shaky breath. The laughter and music around them faded as she was pulled back into memories she tried so hard to forget. She got sick. The girl said quietly. It happened fast. We had no money for treatment. After she left, everything fell apart. I lost our home. There was no one left to help me. She swallowed hard. I slept wherever I could. I tried to work, but no one wanted to hire someone like me. Music was the only thing I had left, but even that slipped away. Her voice trembled. She tightened her grip on her hands. The CEO listened silently. He wasn't used to stories like hers. His world was filled with business meetings, luxury hotels, private cars, and people who praised him for his power. He almost forgot that outside his bubble, real suffering existed. I'm sorry. He said quietly, words he rarely used. The girl shook her head quickly. It's okay, she whispered. I don't want pity, I just want a chance to be myself again, even for a moment. Before the CEO could answer, the server returned with a full hot meal soup, fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and a perfectly cooked chicken dish. The aroma filled the air. The girl stared at the food as if it were a miracle. Her eyes watered again. Go on, the CEO encouraged. Eat. She hesitated for a second, then picked up the spoon slowly, almost shaking. The first sip of soup made her close her eyes. Warmth spread through her chest. She ate with small, careful bites, as if afraid the food might disappear if she ate too fast. The CEO watched her, feeling a strange heaviness in his chest. She wasn't just hungry, she was starved. Not just for food, but for kindness. For a place where she belonged. You shouldn't be living like this, he said quietly. She paused, spoon frozen in her hand. I don't have another choice. That's not true, the CEO replied firmly. You proved something tonight. You have a gift. A rare one. You have talent that deserves a stage, not a street corner. Her eyes widened, unsure what he meant. The CEO leaned forward. I want to help you, he said. Not just with food, with your life. She stared at him, speechless. You don't have to trust me right away, he continued, but I'm offering you a chance. A real chance. You deserve that much. The girl felt her heart swell again, fear, hope, disbelief all tangled together. Why? She whispered. Why would you help someone like me? The CEO looked at her seriously. Because, he said slowly, I asked you to play for a meal. But what you gave us tonight was a reminder. A reminder of beauty, of emotion, of something pure. And I don't want that to disappear. Her lip trembled. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a problem, not as a burden, but as someone with potential. Someone worth saving. And deep inside her heart, a new hope lit up brighter than before. The girl sat quietly after finishing her meal, her hands wrapped tightly around the warm cup of water the server had placed beside her. For the first time in a very long while, she felt full, not just in her stomach, but in her heart. Yet the warmth she felt was mixed with fear that all of this was temporary, that soon she would be back outside on the cold streets again. The CEO watched her closely. He saw how she kept glancing down at her clothes, trying to hide stains or tears. How she held her breath whenever someone walked by their table, as if expecting to be told to leave. She was still afraid, still unsure if she deserved to be there. Listen, he said softly, leaning forward. You played beautifully. Not just beautifully, you played with your soul? I've never seen anything like it. She looked up slightly, her eyes uncertain. I want you to play at an event my company is hosting next week, he said plainly. The spoon she was holding slipped from her fingers and clattered softly onto the plate. What? She whispered, stunned. The CEO nodded. A charity event. Many important people will be there, and I want you to perform. Her heartbeat raced. She had no words, no thoughts. Just shock, but she finally stammered. I can't go to events like that. Look at me. She gestured helplessly at her clothes. I don't belong in places like these. He shook his head. You don't belong on the streets? That much is clear. She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. He continued. I'll arrange everything. Clothes, a place to stay, food, lessons if you want them. But most importantly, he paused, locking eyes with her. A chance. A real one. The girl's breath caught. A chance. The word felt unreal. People like her didn't get chances. They got ignored, misunderstood, forgotten. Why me? She whispered. You don't even know my name. The CEO sighed. Then tell me. She hesitated again, afraid of saying it out loud, as if speaking her own name after being invisible for so long might break something. Laya, she said finally, her voice soft. My name is Laya? The CEO repeated it quietly, tasting the name on his tongue. Laya, that's a strong name. She didn't feel strong, but hearing him say it made her feel a little braver. The CEO gently tapped his fingers on the table. Laya, I won't force you. This is your choice. But your music has the power to change lives, including your own. She shook her head slowly. I don't think I can do it. I haven't played like that in years. Maybe today was just luck. It wasn't luck, he said firmly. It was talent. Natural talent that survives even in the darkest times. That's rare. She lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. No one had ever spoken about her with such respect. Not since her mother? Her mother, who always told her she had something special. The memories swirled inside her. Painful but warm. You said the event is in a week? Laya asked softly. He nodded. A week. She bit her lip, thinking. I don't know if I'm good enough. He leaned back slightly, studying her. You're more than good enough. But if you want help, I can arrange a piano teacher to work with you. Someone who will prepare you. Laya blinked in surprise. A teacher? For someone like me? For someone talented, he corrected. Her eyes stung with tears again. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed. She paused, searching for the right words. I don't want to disappoint you. You already impress me more than anyone else has in years, he said gently. The only thing that would disappoint me is seeing you give up on yourself. His words hit her deeply. Too deeply. She dropped her gaze to the table, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup, trying to steady her thoughts. For years she had survived alone, believing she didn't matter, believing she had no future. Now suddenly, someone powerful, someone important, was offering her a path she never imagined she would see again. What if? She whispered, what if I fail? The CEO smiled, not the confident business smile he showed the world, but a warm, sincere smile she had never seen from him. Then we try again, he said. And again, until you don't fail. She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever offered her patience. No one had ever offered her a second chance, certainly not a third or fourth. So? He asked, will you let me help you? Laya took a long, shaky breath. Her heart was pounding. Her mind was screaming in fear. But deep inside, her soul, her musical soul, whispered something else. Say yes. She lifted her head slowly. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. The CEO nodded with approval. Good. At that moment, someone approached their table. A tall woman with elegant posture, holding a tablet and wearing a sharp suit, clearly part of the hotel staff or an event organizer. Excuse me, she said respectfully to the CEO. Then looked at Laya with a gentleness she didn't expect. That performance was beyond amazing. If you ever need a rehearsal space or access to our piano, the hotel would be honored to let you use it. Laya's eyes widened. Really? The woman nodded. Really? For the first time in years, kindness found her from every direction. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. The CEO stood up, offering his hand to her. Come on, he said softly. Let's get you somewhere warm for tonight, tomorrow. A new beginning starts. Laya stared at his hand, hesitating only for a second before placing her small, fragile fingers into his steady palm, and in that moment, her life began to change. The next morning felt different for Laya, almost unreal. She woke up in a warm, clean room, the first safe place she had slept in for years. The sheets were soft, the pillows smelled fresh, and sunlight streamed through the window like gentle fingers touching her face. She blinked several times, half expecting everything to disappear, half expecting to find herself back on the cold pavement. Outside the hotel, but the room stayed. The warmth stayed for a moment. She just lay there, feeling the truth settle in her chest. She wasn't homeless anymore. Not today. Maybe not ever again. A soft knock sounded at the door. Laya? The CEO's voice called. Are you awake? She scrambled up in the bed, startled. Yes. The door opened gently and he stepped in, no longer in a strict business suit, but in something more casual, still expensive, but softer, friendlier. He smiled slightly when he saw her. Good. Breakfast is ready downstairs. Breakfast. The word felt strange. She wasn't used to meals at regular times, or meals at all. She followed him to the dining area, where a warm plate waited eggs, toast, fruit, and a cup of tea. Laya hesitated, unsure if it was truly for her. Eat, he told her. You'll need your energy today. For what? She asked, taking a small bite. Your first practice, he answered. Your pianist teacher is ready to meet you. The bite froze in her mouth. My teacher? He nodded. A retired concert pianist. I told him I found someone worth teaching. Laya's heart pounded so hard it hurt. She wasn't sure if she was excited or terrified. A few hours later, she stood inside a quiet music room. Sunlight washed across a polished black piano in the center. A tall man with gray hair and kind eyes stood beside it. You must be Laya, he said. Smiling warmly, she nodded nervously. I watched the video, he continued, lifting a tablet and playing a clip of her performance from the hotel. Someone had recorded it. Her heart nearly stopped. You watched that? She whispered. Of course. And I cried, he admitted calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You play with your heart. That's rare. Laya felt her face flush with embarrassment and pride. He motioned toward the piano bench. Sit, we have work to do. And so began her new routine. The teacher started with gentle exercises, showing her how to relax her hands, how to breathe with the music, how to feel the emotion without letting it overwhelm her. Her fingers shook at first, rusty from so many years away from proper practice. She stumbled, hesitated, forgot notes, but every time she made a mistake. He spoke softly. Try again, Laya. You're doing beautifully. The CEO visited the room often, watching quietly from the doorway. He never interrupted, never rushed her. He simply watched her grow, slowly. Laya began to trust the piano again. Her fingers loosened, her confidence returned. Her music filled the room with something pure and powerful. As the days passed, people in the hotel started noticing her. Staff greeted her warmly. A chef sneaked her extra pastries. A housekeeper gifted her a hairbrush and ribbon. A guard who once tried to chase her away now held the door open with a proud smile. Laya felt something she thought she would never feel again: belonging. One evening, after a long practice session, she walked back to the room the hotel had given her. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, a girl with cleaner clothes, brushed hair, and eyes that no longer looked empty. That night, she cried quietly, not from sadness, but from gratitude. The next morning, a surprise waited for her. The CEO held a phone, scrolling through something. Laya, he said, your video went viral. She blinked. What? He handed her the phone. There it was, her, sitting at the hotel piano, tears falling as she played a heartbreaking melody. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. People were writing things like, she plays like she's lived 1,000 lives. This girl needs to be on a world stage. She made me cry. Laya's hands shook as she held the phone. People like my music? She whispered. They love your music, the CEO corrected. And your story. That performance changed everything. He paused, studying her expression. You're becoming an inspiration. Laya covered her mouth with trembling fingers. The girl who once slept under bridges, who begged for scraps, who cried alone on cold nights. That girl was now inspiring strangers across the world. The CEO placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're rising, Laya," he said softly. "You're rising from everything that tried to break you." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears didn't fall. She stood tall, holding on to this new strength inside her. She practiced every day after that, harder, stronger, with more passion. She knew the charity event was coming. She knew big things were waiting, for the first time since she lost everything. She wasn't afraid of the future. She was ready for it. The night of the charity event arrived sooner than Laya expected. For a whole week she had practiced until her fingers ached, until every note felt like part of her heartbeat. But even with all that preparation, the moment she stepped out of the car in front of the grand concert hall, her breath caught. The building towered above her, glowing with golden lights. Guests in elegant outfits walked across the red carpet, photographers snapped pictures, and soft music drifted from inside. It was a world she once watched from far away, a world she believed she'd never belonged to. Now she was walking toward it. Her hands trembled at her sides. She wore a simple but beautiful dress the CEO had arranged for her, nothing loud or fancy, just soft blue fabric that flowed gently around her. Her hair was brushed, tied loosely with a ribbon. For the first time since her mother's death, Leah felt pretty. The CEO appeared beside her, adjusting his tie. When he saw her nervous expression, he gave her a reassuring nod. "You'll be fine," he said softly. "That's what everyone keeps saying," she whispered. "But I'm scared." He looked at her for a long moment. "Being scared means you care. And that's good. It means your heart is in the music." She took a shaky breath. "What if I make a mistake?" He smiled gently. "Then you make a mistake. And you keep going. Laya, the world doesn't love you because you're perfect. They love you because you're real." His words settled deep inside her. She nodded slowly. Inside the concert hall, hundreds of seats were filled. Beautiful chandeliers hung like glowing stars. Cameras from news channels were set up. People chatted excitedly, waiting for the event to begin. When Laya stepped backstage, the teacher who had helped her all week walked toward her with a proud smile. "You're ready," he said. "Trust yourself." The host of the event introduced various speakers and performers. Each speech, each moment felt like an eternity for Laya. Her stomach tightened, her hands shook. She kept wiping her palms on her dress, afraid her fingers would slip on the keys. Then the lights dimmed. And now, the host announced, "We have a very special performance. A young pianist with a remarkable story. Someone whose talent has touched the hearts of millions in just 1 week." The audience murmured with curiosity. "Please welcome Laya." For a second, she couldn't move. Her feet felt stuck to the floor. Her breath wouldn't come. But then, from the front row, she saw the CEO stand up. He gave her a small, confident nod. She also saw her teacher smiling proudly, encouraging her with his eyes. Laya swallowed hard and stepped into the light. The hall fell silent. She walked toward the grand piano at the center of the stage. The stage lights made her dress glow, and her shadow stretched far behind her. She sat down slowly, every muscle tense, every heartbeat loud. Her fingers hovered over the keys. They trembled. She closed her eyes. "Mom, I hope you're watching." And then she played. The first notes were soft and gentle, like a tender whisper. The audience leaned forward immediately, recognizing that this was not ordinary music. This was emotion-given sound. This was a soul speaking through the piano. Her hands moved with grace she didn't know she had. The melody grew stronger, fuller. Sometimes bright like hope, sometimes deep like sorrow. She played her childhood dreams. Her darkest nights, her mother's love, her hunger, her fear. And her new beginning. Every note carried her story. Every chord carried her heart. The audience didn't blink. They didn't move. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. The music traveled through the hall like a warm wind, filling every corner with something magical. Halfway through the piece, Laya felt tears rising, but she didn't stop. She let them fall. She played through the tears, just like she had the night she first touched the piano again. It made the music more real, more powerful. In the front row, The CEO felt something he rarely felt: pride. Genuine, overwhelming pride. Not for a business deal or an achievement, but for a girl who fought life with music and won. When Laya reached the final section of the piece, her fingers slowed, each note like a goodbye, a thank you, a promise. The last notes lingered in the air, delicate and slow, like a breath held between two worlds, then silence. Silence so deep it felt alive. And then the entire hall erupted into applause, thunderous, overwhelming, emotional applause. People stood to their feet as if pulled by a force. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Others shouted praise without holding back. Laya sat frozen, overwhelmed. She had never heard applause from this many people. She had never been celebrated, never been lifted by so many hearts. The CEO stood and clapped the hardest, pride lighting his face. The teacher wiped tears from his eyes, clapping with all his strength. Even the staff backstage were cheering. Laya slowly rose from the piano bench. Her legs shook, but she managed to bow. The crowd roared louder, for the first time in her life. She felt truly seen, truly valued, truly alive. After the show, reporters rushed toward her. Fans wanted pictures. People wanted to shake her hand. Her story spread everywhere about the homeless girl who shocked a CEO, who shocked the world with her music. But when the chaos settled, Laya walked to the CEO quietly. He looked at her with a soft smile. "You did it." She shook her head gently. "We did it." He raised an eyebrow. "We?" "You gave me the chance," she said. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." The CEO paused. Touched by her words, Laya looked out at the emptying hall, filled with lights, claps, and memories she would carry forever. She whispered, more to herself than anyone, "I'm home. This time." It wasn't just wishful thinking. It was the truth.